And I want to thank you both again, all three of you, for being here this morning to share about the life of Jane Haynes. We're so grateful to celebrate her life today. I think Christopher reminded me that her birthday actually is the 14th, so we're a little bit early, but we're just happy that we get a Sunday together to think about Jane and what she meant in our lives. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Christopher. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, thank you, Ruthie. It's wonderful to see you all and to celebrate Jane's birthday a few days early. She always thought it was important that she was Monty's birthday sister. And was she one day before, or it was different than the calendar?
Money's 15th.
Well, yeah, 15th, but if you go by the fact that the time is ahead in India, Mother's birthday was Mani's birthday, if you see what I mean. Because by the 14th here is already the 15th there. So they really shared the same birthday. They thought of themselves as sisters.
Yeah, they would always comment to each other about that. But it's wonderful to be here with you all. I thought I'd just show some pictures, and really this is just to set the stage for Wendy and Charles to talk. And many of you knew her, some might not have, so I thought I'd just show a few images just to bring her here, and then Wendy and Charles will tell their stories. So Ruthie, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you all see my screen now? Yes?
Yes, I can see.
Okay, wonderful.
It got nice and big.
All right, good. So so this will be a familiar image to those of you who saw Jane in the meeting place, always dressed elegantly for whatever was the occasion, with her her string of pearls and greeting people before a meeting. So I'm starting way at the beginning with here newborn Jane. Let's see, so this would be 1924, and we were just figuring out that she would be 98 now. You know, so she could still be alive. She died really when she was so young, just 72. I wish she could have lived to be as old as Kitty. But Jane with her mom. Jane grew up in Durham, North Carolina. Her father was the editor of Durham Sun newspaper. And I love this picture. Here she is in school hanging out by the water fountain. You know, one thing I remember her saying is that she loved this song growing up that her father would sometimes play. And if I follow you, you'll follow me. And she would often sing that song with him. And then years later, when she was in India, she heard Meenu singing it on the bus. And Meenu said that Baba liked that song. And so she always thought that was a connection to her childhood. So here we are with Wendy and Charles and John's dad, Charles Haynes Jr. Is this at your dad's restaurant?
Yes, that's at the Saddle Club.
The Saddle Club in Durham. Jane has a cigarette in her hand there. Do you notice that? Yeah, so she was a lifelong smoker.
She
correct?
was.
Yeah. Even to the very end, but very secretly. Virginia Slims.
Now, Christopher.
Well, she's not here anymore, so we can tell everything.
That's true. That's true.
And this is in Myrtle Beach. And Jane talked about how she really had to talk her husband into taking her into Myrtle Beach, and that Charles Haynes's family preferred the mountains. But finally they did go, and then they had a family house in Windy Hill. Is that right? Yeah. And then here, this is the arrival of Wendy. And John and Charles may be seeing her for one of the very first times.
Yeah,
huh?
first time probably.
And the three. Charles looks the least happy there of all three.
Yeah.
I like it.
I look confused.
And
Yeah.
this is such a fascinating picture, and I can't quite put my finger on what it is, but this is, whoops, sorry. This is Jane in Durham in the living room of the house where Charles and Wendy and John grew up, and dressed in this elegant gown, but the expression on her face somehow doesn't match the occasion. And she looks kind of introspective, a little bit far away and not completely present. And there's something about this that expresses something about how she described her life then, which is feeling like an outsider, feeling that she was on a spiritual quest that people around her did not understand, and a kind of feeling of really marginalization, isolation within a pretty traditional, suburban community. And during those years, she started acting and directing first at a theater in Durham, North Carolina. So here she is in the movie Laura. Or no, well, sorry, the play Laura, but there's a wonderful movie of this we just watched. And then she opened up her theater in Myrtle Beach at the Ocean Forest Hotel, which no longer stands. And the theater, Ocean Forest, operated on this kind of summer stock star system. And so Jane was able to bring some movie stars who were maybe a little bit past their prime, but still big stars. So people like Zazu Pitts, and who are some of the other people, Charles?
Oh, all the greats that nobody has ever heard of anymore, but Charlie Ruggles, Alan Alda, who was
Not Alan.
not Alan Alda, his father, Robert Alda, Jeffrey Lynn,
John
William-
Ireland.
John Ireland, who's the
Um,
woman suitor?
Toby- Shelley Winters.
No, I don't know, Shelley.
Oh, you're not thinking of her.
Who sued Mother for the Cat on a Hot Tin Roof? That woman, she was famous.
I can't
She's
see
so
it.
famous, we can't remember her anymore, but
Oh, you
anyway,
mean Veronica Lake.
Veronica Lake, yes.
Oh, my God.
Yes.
What
she
a
was-
pistol.
So
she
we
was-
we
she was
grew up with
tough.
all these stars.
But
They were actually big time movie stars, and the joking aside, even then they were still well known, but in those days they didn't make money in Hollywood, right? So
Not in the summers, especially.
well, not, yeah, in their careers, they didn't take home huge amounts of money like they do now. So they had to do summer stock to, I guess, to earn a living.
And the theater turned out to be very important because this was really the means that Jane first met Elizabeth Patterson, who was an attendee at the performance one night soon after Nerina Machiavelli's funeral. And then that led to a series of events when Jane first visited the center and Elizabeth. Elizabeth was living at Yupon Dunes at that time. So they first met in June of 57. And I love this card. This is Elizabeth's handwriting. Welcome to the doorway of a new life. Today's hymn. The King of love my shepherd is, whose goodness faileth never. I nothing lack if I am his, and he is mine forever. The doorway to a new life, the doorway of knowing about Baba, and then really becoming part of Elizabeth's family. This is a lovely poem, which was in Jane's papers, and then Wendy gave it to Charles for Charles to give to me because it's dated April 21st, which is Charles and my anniversary. But it's a poem that Elizabeth wrote out. Elizabeth loved poetry when she was a girl. We have a lot of her poetry books, and she really studied them and marked them out, annotated verses. But this is by a poet named Josephine Ross. And Jessie Bell Rittenhouse. And Elizabeth changed the wording a little bit so that it refers to both Baba and to Jane. So my debt to you, beloved, capital B, is one I cannot pay in any coin, in any realm, on any reckoning day. For where is she to measure the debt when all is said, to her who makes you dream again when all your dreams were dead? Isn't that beautiful? Right. So a year after Narina's passing, which must have been so devastating for Elizabeth, and then Jane coming into her life. And so the dead dreams turning into joy.
That's really beautiful. Thanks.
Yes. Christmas at Yukon Dunes. So this is probably soon before Charles and Wendy and John met Baba. Maybe December of 57.
It could be December 57 or December 58 after Baba, but I'm not entirely sure. Maybe Wendy is, but I think looking at our ages, I think it may be December 58. But anyway, yes, that's the typical scene in the Christmas celebrations. Elizabeth always loved to make set the table and get out special things to make it beautiful. That's the only thing, only time of year she ever cared about China or anything else is Christmas, Thanksgiving, where she would decorate the table herself. So
This is Elizabeth in the back corner.
there's Elizabeth,
And this is Ruth White,
that's Sadie
John,
Haig over there.
John,
Sadie Martin or Sadie Haig behind Ruth.
Wendy, and this is Margaret Krask.
Yeah, look at her.
Yeah.
Haha.
I feel like this must be Christmas morning when they all got up
Yeah.
early to open their present.
Well, no, because we wouldn't.
Oh,
do
you
that.
open on Christmas Eve.
We open Christmas Eve. So this is probably Christmas Eve.
Those three look happy, don't they?
She does look like she's in a bathrobe, though.
Yeah.
Well, it could be. Our tradition was to open Christmas Eve, but maybe when we were in Yukon Dunes, Wendy may remember we did open some Christmas morning.
Mm.
Elizabeth doesn't look like she's in a bathrobe.
No,
though,
she's
so
all
I-
dressed up.
Oh, I know what it is. Mother got a bathrobe for Christmas.
Oh,
Oh, that's what it is.
That's
Yeah.
what it is. Yeah, I was wondering why she's walking around in her.
Oh.
And then, so that could be Christmas 57, 58. We don't know for sure, but then Baba, there in May 58. Who brought these roses?
Anna Rosa Karash.
Yeah. Baba with Erich next to him. Who's behind Baba? Is that Naraman?
That's Naraman.
And this, I think it's the only picture we have of Jane with Baba in Myrtle Beach. So Jane is the person at upper left. Hold on. With the white scarf tied around her head. So here she is. Can you all see my cursor?
Yep.
Okay. And Pearl is going to tell a story that relates to this, the umbrella story. So I'm going to save that. So then after Baba came, Jane and moved her family to New York to pursue her acting career. So these were publicity photos for her. Looking very beautiful. And then her most successful work in New York was when she was in this play Jolly's Progress that starred Eartha Kitt.
And Wendell Corey.
Is that Wendell Corey?
That's
Yeah.
Wendell Corey, yeah. He was famous too. But you have to be very old to remember that. Very, very old.
And then the East-West Gathering, November of 62. So Jane is here on the front row next to Elizabeth. And then here, Elizabeth marked this photo, 1962, Darshan Pune, Avatar Mayor Baba, Jane and Elizabeth in the assembly. What's the assembly?
Well, I think Elizabeth thought that this was sitting in front of Baba under the pandal. I don't think it is, but it's 62, but I'm not sure. I think it may have been when we went to Vila's for lunch or something. I'm not sure. It doesn't look like sitting under the pandal, but anyway, doesn't matter.
And then the big group shot with all the Westerners gathered around Baba. So Jane is way at the far right over here. You know, we only found this picture pretty recently. It was in an old slide that we put for the scanner. And, you know, usually when you see this picture is cropped so that you can't see the people on the sides. But then when we found another one, then we saw there are people at the edges, including Jane. There's Wendy.
Yep.
And then that's Charles's blonde hair right behind Wendy.
Where is this? Guru Prasad?
Yes,
Mhm.
it's right outside. Bear and Baba's brother wanted to take film outside with Baba and all of us. So we all went outside and gathered around Baba. So it's just in front of Guru Prasad.
Do you remember, Charles, how Barham started complaining because Baba wasn't moving? He said, Baba, this is a film. Please move. Baba started gesturing and, joking around. It's
Yeah.
very funny.
And then here, Jane embracing Baba. So I think this was the day when it rained hard.
It is, yes, because
And
we all had different clothes on.
And so this was the yellow dress that was loaned to Jane by the women Mandali when you all came back to the tent after the rain. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. And the only reason Mother got an embrace, because generally Baba didn't embrace Westerners between arrival and departure of the darshan for the most part. Some children perhaps got exceptions, but the reason that she got this embrace is because the yellow dress that the women Mandali gave her to wear happened to be the color that the women who were performing the arti, the Eastern women performing the arti, needed. One of their group was missing, and they needed different colors. And the yellow color person was not there. So they asked Mother to be in the arti performance in front of Baba, and as a result, she got this embrace from Baba afterwards. For many years, we thought it was Wendy.
Yes.
We thought it was Wendy for many, many years.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
one day I was looking at it at home, and all of a sudden I saw the roots in Mother's hair from the from the dye. So I said, that's not me. So I called Mother up. She was at the World's Fair, and I told her she was so unbelievably happy and excited. She didn't quite believe me, so she came running home, and there it was. And she had always longed for a shot with Baba like this. And it was beyond what she could have hoped for.
Oh, yes.
Unbelievable.
So you're going to tell the story about how your mother ended up working with Elizabeth and Kitty,
A little bit,
And
yes, a little bit.
and how Baba referred to that, the East-West gathering. So Jane and family moved to Myrtle Beach in '65, right? And
Yes.
built Mayor House, and then Jane began her work working so closely with Elizabeth and Kitty and helping with the center. I love this picture of them in the meeting place. And Wendy, I bet you love this too, because there's your hubby in the background. Look at really young buds back there.
Very young.
This is Richie Bloom's wedding, I think.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
What?
Richie Bloom's wedding reception.
Oh. Isn't that Malcolm next to Buzz?
Yeah, but this is the wedding reception of Richie Bloom,
Oh, excuse me, I got it.
Richie and Lori Bloom.
Yeah, they look
Oh,
like they're making a toast. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I thought we were in the meeting place. I wasn't sure.
This is the meeting place, isn't it?
Right,
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the meeting place.
yeah.
With Kitty. So this is the bench near Baba's house.
It's in front of Delruba, yes. It's right in front of the house.
So you all know the story of Happy Club, which Wendy started and brought in children from Race Path to spend the day at the center and to have lunch and to play games. And that tradition went on for so many decades. So here, Jane with one of the Happy Clubbers, and then her grandson, Chris, two of the Happy Clubbers.
Yeah.
Who were some of the families
That's the Hemingway family.
Hemingway family, yeah.
That's, which Hemingway is that with mother? That's,
I think it's Margaret. Margaret. Oh, no, Charlita. Charlita Hemingway, that's right. Yeah,
And Baba blessed this work, right, Wendy?
he did. We sent some photographs of some of the children, and Baba was very happy. And Baba looked at him, was like this, and touched the faces and gave them his blessing.
Oh,
and he sent the children's book that, what's her name wrote?
Ada Schifrin.
Ada Schifrin, thank you. Charlie Ruggles, Ada Schifrin, they're all fading away. In my brain. But no, Ada Schifrin did this little children's book, and I think it's still around. And Baba sent a copy of that to the Children of Happy Club and signed it.
Yeah.
I think you must have that, Wendy.
Pardon me?
Do you have that yourself?
Yeah, they sent it to me, and with a message that it was for the Happy Club. Yeah. Very beautiful.
and then Jane spent so many years in the context of which a lot of people here in this Zoom room would have known her, which is coming to Mayer House or then later to Mayer House Studio and coming to meet with Jane and to talk about their lives and for her to tell her stories of Baba. So this is Jane with Charlie Mills, who she was very close to, and Charlie gave her painting lessons.
Yeah.
So that's why the painting behind you is so lovely, Ruthie, because Mother learned to paint from Charlie. So that's one of Mother's paintings that Ruthie has behind her. For those of you joining late, we talked about it earlier.
And then something sweet is on the table next to Jane. She has Charles's books, not his Baba book, but works that he wrote for his own work about issues of religious freedom and First Amendment, and love to show those to people. And then the picture on her table is of Charles with Dick Riley, former governor of South Carolina.
Yeah, he was the Secretary of Education at the moment, but Mother loved to put things around her, of her children, and as I guess talking points, or just, I don't know what it was. It was like a little set, but she had me with Bill Clinton for a while. I don't know why people would have wanted to see that, but she loved to have that up. So funny.
And then in addition to her very public work of meeting with people, she loved to retreat back into her bedroom to work on her book, which became Letters of Love, and to send letters, and especially to her spiritual sister, Mani. So you see Mani's picture, Mani and Mara, on her desk next to her. And here she's reading one of Mani's letters. She was a very private person in a lot of ways and loved to spend time alone, reading from her spiritual books. Of course, she most read St. Teresa of Avila, also John of the Cross, loved Pope John the 23rd, Thomas Merton. She went on a lot of retreats to Mepkin Abbey because of her love for Thomas Merton. So speaking of Mani, she said this is her favorite picture of herself, looking so happy with Mani. And then, so when Jane was 71, she fell ill, and I think she first started having symptoms summer of 96, including when she and Wendy were on a cruise together. I guess Wendy was your last trip together and started
Actually,
having lack of appetite. Go ahead.
Well, just to say that was in May of 96. That's right. It was May of 96 that we went on that cruise together. And then she found out in June.
Yes.
We got back. So.
And it was pancreatic cancer. And in August of 96, she went to the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston to get a surgery to remove the tumor. But pancreatic cancer is such a hard diagnosis. And so the surgery was in 96, and then she passed away April 97. But stayed in such good spirits during the really hard part. So here she's ringing a bell. She had a bell because she had a hospital room with a little adjoining room that was for helpers. And that was where Wendy and I and Charles took turns sleeping. And so she had the bell so she could let us know when she needed something.
Now that bell.
But the bell, yeah.
Where's that bell?
Oh, I have the bell. I'll bring it out later.
The bell we think is the same. Well, it was the one Elizabeth used at the dinner table, you know, to say, well, we're finished now, to let Bessie or Evelina later know meal is over, or lunch, you know. So the bell was much used, but it was also there in Yupon Dunes. And then Baba must have used this bell because Baba was given a bell because he was, of course, in a different area of the house so that he could ring and let them know if he needed something. So we think this is it's the only bell I know of. So I'm sure it's the bell that it was used in all those different ways. Most importantly by Baba himself, of course.
And then the little picture that you see in the silver frame on the table is probably her favorite picture, and the picture that most spoke to her when she first learned about Baba, which is the one of Elizabeth took of Baba holding the lamb. And when she was at MUSC, she carried this picture around constantly, including she wanted to carry it into surgery with her. And she called it Lammy. And when she was going to surgery, she made these gestures. She did this the whole time at the hospital when she couldn't talk well. And she would make these gestures that were like Baba's hand gestures. And they were, I love Baba and I love you. And then one of the things she asked for when she first woke up from the anesthesia, she said Lammy. So she wanted to see that picture. And then the last one.
This is towards the end also.
Towards the end, yes. This picture says so much about how she greeted people and all the love. Maybe just one last thing I'll say is that, you know, maybe one of the things that struck people so deeply about Jane goes back to something Baba told her in 1958. And it was one of the last times she saw him in the lagoon cabin, and it was towards the end of the Sahavas. And Jane started having a lot of anxiety and really a panic attack because it was time for Baba to leave soon. And she was afraid, and she thought to herself, well, now he's leaving and everything's going to go back to like what it was before when Baba came, and was feeling so depressed. And then while she was having these thoughts, she heard a voice cry out, Jane, Baba wants you. And Baba had read what was in her heart, and she came to the lagoon cabin, and Baba told her, do not be nervous or afraid, for I'll always be with you physically, which I think is such a remarkable and mysterious thing for Baba to say. He said a lot, I'll always be with you, but to be with you physically. And Jane wrote that in so many books. Like when she was reading St. Teresa, she would often write in the margins, and 1958, Baba said, don't be nervous or afraid, I'll always be with you physically. And she would underline the physical part. I think that's something I felt being around Jane, was that she did carry Baba's presence around with her. So maybe that's the physical part. It just was always there, this feeling of authority and her closeness to Baba, right, even in the most casual situations. Well, so who's going to talk first, Wendy or Charles? Charles, okay. So Charles is going to tell the story behind, or relates to this picture of Baba on the beach.
I don't know whether that's good. Is that good?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I look like I'm not looking at people, but that's all right. Thank you, Christopher. That's so beautiful. I so appreciate your sharing about Jane, not just because it's wonderful to have someone else sharing, not just her children, but because you are one of her children and became one of her children. And I think this is true, that there are very, very few people that you know, became as close to her and as trusted by her as you were, and she loved you so much. A mark of that is that Christopher could tell her what she didn't want to hear. and even I had a hard time doing that. So that's kind of a measure of the closeness, if you will. So I wanted to share two stories really, and then let Wendy share. And I don't know, I chose these two stories because I think they have a special theme for her life with Baba, but I also think they have a special sort of message or theme for our lives with Baba. So that's, again, I guess why I plucked them out of the many stories one could share. And there are stories I've told you will recognize that I've told before. They're sort of favorites. And they remind me of Baba's words in one of my very, very favorite quotes, where Baba says, the creation. Why am I blanking on this quote?
I don't know, because it's one of your favorites.
It is. But it's like Charlie Ruggles. I can't remember. No,
It'll come back.
No, but, my response being divine. That's the last
Oh,
part.
every moment.
Every moment. I tell you what, getting old. Wendy and I laugh about this. There are these things that just go out of your head suddenly that you know so well. So anyway, when Baba said, every moment I respond to the whole of creation, and my response, being divine, is wholly from love. There you go. So these two stories make me feel that those words from Baba. So this is early on, obviously. Mother had just met Baba this week that you're seeing this photograph, the 1958 Sahabas. And she had known of Baba for the last year at this point. But it's one thing, you know, she was drawn to Baba and she loved Elizabeth and Kitty and wanted very much, you know, to be close to Baba. But she hadn't had her inner experience of Baba yet. And it was more of this longing to be close, longing for Baba to pay her attention, to take her in, you know, in his close companionship. And so when Baba came physically, naturally, this was in her foremost feeling, was how can I be close? Will he love me? Will he recognize me? This is how it is around Baba. We all get very selfish in a very wonderful way, which I've always felt that the only time Baba wants you to be selfish is around him and for him, and want him more and more. So she did, and she met him and was drawn to him and loved him, and you know that, but still hadn't had deeper experience yet. Baba, that comes from Baba, as all of you well know. This is not something we do. So, you know, you can long for it, or as Mani says, you long to long. If you can't long, at least long to long, right? And so she longed to long for Baba to recognize her. And so this is a very little thing in one way, but it's a very big thing in another way. That's this story of Baba and the umbrella. People can see me, so I can keep this up, yes? You can see me talking, yes? Yeah, okay. So I'll keep this up because in case I gesture and yeah. So as everyone here knows, of course, Baba would have an umbrella over him when he would walk around or go places. And apparently this was from the very earliest days. You know, you see pictures of Baba with the umbrella over him almost from the beginning, you know, very early days. A sign of respect, you could say, but also Baba was very sensitive to heat and wind and things like that. Baba was sensitive to that. So anyway, this was the thing, an umbrella. And naturally, the umbrella became a wonderful opportunity for people to do something for Baba, to be close to Baba. And so Baba, knowing this, you know, would have this person carry the umbrella for a while, and then he would turn and have this person carry the umbrella, and then this person like that. And so it was special, and people, of course, naturally were very touched when Baba asked them to do that. And Mother, you know, didn't really know Baba's ways that much, but she knew enough to try to be close physically, I mean, to be in his proximity. And so you can see her here, you know, to be nearby. A lesson I also learned early on, the nearer you are physically, the more opportunity there might be for something, you know, some glance, something, some gesture, some touch sometimes. So yeah, being close physically. And here she is, you know, next to Baba in his chair, and there, I think this is the day they went down to the beach. And so Mother kept thinking, well, this is wonderful. This will be my opportunity, you know, Baba, to do something for Baba. Baba will, I know this sounds almost, you know, why would this be such an important thing? But maybe all of you can put yourselves in that position. And you can feel, oh, I would want Baba to choose me, you know, to just for a few minutes to carry the umbrella. And that became all that she could think about. You know, oh, Baba's going to let me carry the umbrella. And so they go down to the beach, they walk around, all these things happen. Baba's being carried, of course. And Baba would then stop and say, all right, Beryl has carried the umbrella now. You know, let's give it over here to Adele or to Anita or whatever. And every time he did that, Mother would kind of put herself sort of, I guess we call it photo bombing today. She'd kind of put herself in the picture like, you know, hey, me, I'm next. And Baba would look over and then look right to the person next to her, as though she wasn't even there, and pick on that person. And so Mother said, oh, well, next time Baba will pick me. And this went on the whole time. This went on well, you know, a while. And they got back into the center, and Baba was taken to the lagoon cabin. And Mother had not been chosen that whole time. And she was devastated. She was devastated that Baba didn't recognize her, that Baba didn't choose her, that Baba didn't acknowledge her. And this thought came into her head, unbidden. This is how it is, you know, with us. We have these things that just come strongly about Baba, and it came to her, you know, in her newness to Baba. Well, if he is who he says he is, surely he knew that I wanted to carry the umbrella. So how could he ignore me like that? If he is who he is. You think she'd take her stand on a bigger issue than that? But there you are. If he is who he is, why didn't he pick me to carry the umbrella? And as that thought came into her head, Erich comes out of the lagoon cabin and says, "Jane, Baba wants to see you." And so Mother was startled because no one was supposed to go. There's no time set. You know, it was very much set. You met Baba at a certain time and so forth and so on. So she was startled, but she went in, of course, to the lagoon cabin. And there was Baba, the Mandali there, I guess Nariman, Erich, whoever. And Baba looked at her innocently, you know, this is typical of Baba. He would say, "Jane, is there something bothering you?" Mother looked at Baba and she said, Oh, no, Baba, no, nothing, no, I'm fine. I'm just fine. Is that so? Are you sure? There's nothing bothering you? Oh, no, Baba, it's really nothing. It's really nothing, Baba. Now she's a little embarrassed. No, Baba, it's really nothing. Baba says, "Jane, Baba wants to know, what is bothering you?" She said, "Baba, I don't know. I just wanted to carry the umbrella. That's all I wanted. I just wanted to carry the umbrella." And Baba, he looked at her, he smiled, and he opened his arms. And he took her into his embrace. And then he said, Now, Jane, isn't this much better?" And that's how she knew, began to know, that he knows her heart. And then he responds to her heart in every minute of every day. So that's one example. The other is a bit different because Baba works in responding to our heart, but he also responds to our heart even if we don't know what's in it. So that's the next picture. How do I get to the next picture? Oh, there we go. All right, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cry, but I somehow or another. So this is now, of course, the East-West Gathering in 1962. And this is inside Guru Prasad, one of the mornings of the gathering, where the Westerners would be with Baba. I was looking over a list of the Westerners who were there. What was it, 70 people, 100 people? It's a small list. And I was thinking, you know, how extraordinary that of all the people in the world, you know, only that number came from the United States, a few from the United Kingdom, a few from Australia, a little more from Australia than the United Kingdom, but very few people. Anyway, we were all together there with Baba inside in the morning, and in the afternoon, we would be outside with the Easterners together under the pandal. So this is one of those morning sessions that I'm sure you all are familiar with. And typical of Baba, Baba's so natural, and the atmosphere with Baba is always very much like to me, it was like we were seeing him in 1962 like it was the next day. We had seen him in 58, and it was like the next day. It was so natural and so warm, and Baba was interested in everything and everybody. And so one of the things sometimes he would do, if there was not a discourse or music playing or something, Baba might stop and he might ask people around him, the Westerners, about their family or their lives or something like that. And I have to say, and I know this is obvious because all of you who love him so much and know him so well, it probably doesn't even need to be said to this group, but I have to say that, at least in my experience of that when he was in the form, I never thought, why doesn't he know this about people? I don't know that anybody thought that. I would be surprised if anyone had that thought. Well, wait a minute, he's asking me about my children, or he wants to know, about the newborn, or he wants to know about my this or that. Why doesn't Baba's God? Surely he knows such things. And the only way I can express it is, and I'll speak for myself, that I always felt Baba knew everything about us, about our heart, our deepest, most heart, and then would take on not knowing all of these details in order to be human and be with us, to be natural, like that, so that we could tell him something, so that it was a relationship. It wasn't mind reading, or now there's nothing to talk about because I'm God after all. It was always this human Baba, but at the same time, it never occurred to me that he didn't know all, if that makes any sense. The all-knowing one took on not knowing, if you will, to be with us as a human being. Well, to appreciate what happens in this little teeny story, all Baba stories are little and they're all big, they have all these layers. But to understand what happens in this little story, you have to know that before Mother, we went to India in 1962. Mother had been, as Christopher mentioned, trying to develop a career in the theater in New York. She came at it late, she had many things in the theater, producer, director, and then, her amateur theater work in Durham when she was married, all of these things. And she always kind of wanted to pursue an acting career. And she certainly had the glamour and the beauty, and I think she had the talent. So naturally, she wanted to pursue that in New York. That was her dream, study with some of the great teachers. And she did. Boris Konofsky, Lee Strasberg, she wanted to do that. But she started late in the theater. Late means, especially for a beautiful young woman, 33, after she met Bob at 33. It was a little late to start out in New York. But nevertheless, Elizabeth put us all in her big station wagon with the dog and the cat and drove us to Manhattan. And there we were. And Mother to try this out, you see. And of course, it was very frustrating. I say, of course, it isn't. Why should it be? With Baba, you never know what Baba wants. And she tried, of course, to accept whatever Baba wants, but it was frustrating. She would go to auditions. I would hold the book for her, as she would call it, so she could practice, and she'd go to these auditions. She'd go to classes. She did a couple of volunteer things, one woman show in Atlantic City, just to say she did something. And then she had that one breakthrough thing where she had a little featured part in a Broadway show, Jolly's Progress. That turned out to be the only thing like that happened to her. So by 1962 rolling around, we had been in New York by that time, several years, 59, 60, 61, like that. Nothing much. And just before Baba called us to India in 62, and first it was going to be May of 62, and then he changed it to November of 62, and we were all just so longing. By now, it seemed like an eternity since we had seen Baba, between 58 and 62, an eternity. And just before we were, and I don't know, I was 13, so what do I remember? But I do remember enough to know that not long before we were supposed to leave for India to see Baba, a telegram came, and Mother received news that she had gotten a part that she was up for. And even more astounding, it was a film role. And she was a stage actress, and she had not done film. But this part, apparently something she heard about and I guess auditioned for, whatever, in New York, and it was to be made in Hollywood, and it was, I've forgotten who was to star in it. It may have been actually Jeffrey Lynn, of all people. That part I don't remember. All I remember is that it was a major project. It was a good role, and she had been cast after all this time. And this was just before we were going to see Baba in India, the East-West Gathering. So you have to know that, because that's what happened just before we left. And then as the days dwindled, between us and leaving, just before we actually left for India, another cable came and said, "Oh, so sorry. We have decided to go another direction, and we've chosen someone else for that part." And of course, she was devastated. This was, after all, her dream. Now, to be fair, her dream had shifted somewhat by that time, because she became more and more absorbed in Baba. She loved Baba so much. But nevertheless, and Elizabeth would come visit us. Kitty came and took care of us when Mother went on the road sometimes with that famous Broadway play. So we went to Myrtle Beach, of course. So there was all of that in her life as well. But she wanted to be an actress, and she wanted to be successful. So this word came that she had lost this part, this dream part that she finally got. So then we arrive in India. So that's the backstory here. We arrive in India, we're with Baba and all that. And Baba is naturally, going around, Henry, Keisha couldn't come, but tell her that I am with her there, not to worry, like that. Different people he would pick out and say, how are your children? Are they grown now? How old are your children? Like that. And Mother was sitting just like you see her in this photograph, which was her spot every morning. She would take this spot right behind Baba, not quite behind, but next to Baba, but just slightly behind where the sofa was, where he was sitting. And so Baba went around the room, and people would say, oh, Baba, this is my life and this is my child and so forth, like this, and Baba like this is that, Baba, how wonderful that is and all that. You know, Baba, so sweet. And then suddenly he turns over his shoulder and looks at Mother. And he says, and Jane, what work have you? And Mother looks at Baba, and her mind is paralyzed in that moment. You know how that happens. She didn't know what to say. Because she had had this wonderful job, and then she had lost this job, and so what to say? She couldn't even express it, and it was such a painful thing. So she just stared at Baba for a moment, and then spontaneously she blurted out, and she later said she has no idea where this came from. It was completely something from deep within that she had no idea, because it wasn't in her mind. She blurted out to Baba, she said, your work, Baba. Yeah, your work, Baba. And this is what I love about Baba so much. So typical Baba. It's like, so surprised and so pleased. Baba says, I'm very pleased to hear that. As though it was her idea. And I love this because this is such a great example of Baba knowing what's deep within, but bringing it out, because then it's meaningful to us if we say it. So he brought it out. I often thought later, well, I don't know what idea people have about God in human form, but presumably Baba could have looked over at Jane and said, Jane, I see you had a great job, then you lost a great job, but don't worry, you're going to be working for me in the future. I mean, he could have done that, but it wouldn't have been Baba. That would be the furthest from Baba that I could imagine, right? Baba never did that. Baba, to his own, how shall I say, Baba could have let you know he knew, he could have read your mind. But then he wouldn't have been Baba. That's all I can say. He wouldn't have been Baba. So she said, your work, Baba. And later she would say, I don't know where it came from. And I didn't know what it meant. But after we returned from India, it manifested. It came to her in the middle of the night that there should be a place for Baba at the World's Fair, which was going to start in 1964. And so just after we got back from India, but it's early 63, I think. And I remember because I woke up in the middle of the night and went up to her room because I thought something was wrong. I had this intuition, and she was sitting up in her bed, and she was weeping and saying, Baba must be at the World's Fair. And I said, Mother, that's kind of absurd, the World's Fair. How can you do that? And she said, no, Baba must be there. He is the avatar. He must be there. And the next couple of years, of course, she became absorbed in that. Oh, she would go to classes, yes, or an audition here or there, like usual. But she became more and more caught up in this World's Fair project to the point that it absorbed her life. The fair was open 6 months of each year, you see. So it was it was one had to be there at that little booth every day. Somebody had to be there, and all the dear old timers, Fred and Ella, Kitty, everybody came and volunteered and took a time sitting at this booth, right, for Baba. It was so sweet. And handing out universal messages, which was when that message was created, was for this thing. And at the end of that time, Mother looked around in her life, if you will, metaphorically, I suppose, and realized she didn't have anything but Baba's work. That was it. Her life had been taken over. And that's when she felt like, this is the time now. I should go and help Elizabeth and Kitty. And Baba wanted this. Baba sent word that this is what she should do. And he was very, very happy. And he told her that you should do everything to help Elizabeth and Kitty. And that became her life for the rest of her life. And she never looked back. She had no regret about, not being this or that in the theater or whatever it is she had in mind. And she had only one prayer to Baba. Let me be near your house and serve you there. Let me be near your home. Means mayor abode, or Baba's house, we call it. That's the only prayer she had. And Baba gave her that prayer. And she could sit in her room and look out every day at that fence and know that everything that Baba had ever promised her was fulfilled. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, Christopher, Charles, thank you so much. That's just so beautiful. All right, I guess we could ask Wendy now. I just wanted to say, I wanted to show a photo. I don't know if you can see this, but Jane and I, at some time I was writing to Jane, and she would answer my letters, and she sent back this photo and said it was her favorite. Maybe it's all weird because it's under glass, but it's she and Monty, and Monty is just so delighted. It's so beautiful. And Dr. Gohair's here, and it feels like Jane has come to India and she's welcomed. And anyway, I treasure this photograph and I keep it here with me. I wanted to say that. And then the other thing I had to say, Wendy, I just have to say this, that, early in your life, you did take time and studied and were very active in the theater and received a very prestigious award of a job, I remember, when you also were doing theater work. And I went to a workshop once that you did, and it was the most incredibly moving experience. I treasure it as one of the most moving experiences in my life. You just brought the creativity of imagination in the theater to me. And so I'm just celebrating that today as well. Your mother was such an amazing creative soul. And you and Charles, you just share that same, we have it in the genes, and we're grateful you're here. So I'll turn it over.
Oh, thank you. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Oh, good. Thank you, Ruthie. That's so lovely of you to say that, honey. Really very sweet. I don't know what the award was, though. I hope I remember.
Well, it was a job that you received. Remember, there were a bunch of contestants and people, there were a lot of people that applied for this position.
That's right. Living Stage Theater Company in Washington. That's right. Oh, well, thank you, Ruthie. And thank you, Charles. That was just beautiful. So lovely. And I'm so happy you talked about New York, because that perfectly leads right into what I wanted to share, which is I wanted to talk about the impact that Mother had on people at the center. I wanted to talk about her role a bit at the center. And I wanted to share about her last days, not a lot, but just to give you a glimpse of that. And if we have time, I have there's so many cards that Mother received in the hospital and then after she died, we had, I don't know, it must be 300 cards from people. And they all are so beautiful that I got a little overwhelmed. I was preparing for this and I thought, oh my God, I can't go through all of these. It's just too many. And I hadn't in a long time. Anyway, I did find 2 or 3. So, okay, let's see. Well, as Charles was saying, it was Mother's heart's desire to serve Baba at the center, that was her longing. And so, and Charles mentioned this too, but I'll give you the exact quote. Elizabeth wrote to Baba saying, quote, "It is Jane's longing to serve you in any way, hoping to be here at the center if it is your wish. If it is what you wish." And of course, Baba knew of Mother's deep longing. And this is what Baba said. Yes, to Mother, yes, move to the center and not to worry. The role you will play will unfold. And that's exactly what happened. It did unfold from the first that she got there, that we all came to the center from New York in the house was built in 66. We came in 1965 and we're waiting for the house to be built. And Charles, I think you stayed at Doruba. Mother and I stayed at the guest house, which is unbelievable. I mean, in those days, there were no retreat guests, not yet, unless they were old timers that came to, who had met Baba at the center and came back. Yeah. So one of the first tasks that Mother had, and many of you will remember this, and it was the highlight of her week, was giving tours at Baba's home and introducing newcomers to the sacredness of the God-man's home here. And it was her joy. And to this day, people still come up to me and say, "Oh, I will never forget my first tour with Jane." I hear that over and over and over. And many, many years later, people are still saying that because she gave of herself wholeheartedly in the tour, especially. Yeah. So in the 70s, when the first big wave of newcomers came, that was the very first. There was a little wave, 1965, 66 of Chapel Hill people. Then the big wave was in the early 70s, 70, 71, 72. Some of you will recognize that time. And Mother's role, well, it was a custom in those days that if you were new, you had to meet Elizabeth, not Elizabeth, Kitty or Mother. So that's what a big part of Mother's role that unfolded was to be one of the people that would welcome people, newcomers, to the center. And it was extraordinary because, again, people still come up to me and talk about their first visit with Mother. I mean, it's unbelievable, really. Yeah. And she connected with people on such a deep heart level. And one reason I think it's so vivid for people is Mother had the capacity to share on that deep level. I've heard this from many people, that she made herself very vulnerable and would share about her own struggles in life to find God and her own darkness and shame in the beginning before Baba. And it touched people very deeply because they felt if Baba accepts Jane, then he's going to accept me. That acceptance was so full, 100%. Wanted to say, yes. So that was one of the, I know. There's so many things I want to say and I'm trying to stick to the script. but I don't think I'm going to be able to. When she was in the hospital, mother, as Christopher said, we would take turns being there, Christopher and me and Charles. And during that period of time, she must have received about 250 cards, if not more. I have a huge box. That's the one I was referring to. Going through, trying to pick out some, but I couldn't. Anyway, but that what touched me was the theme. There were two themes in all the cards. One of them was, "You have transformed my life." The other theme was, "You are my spiritual mother." And I was just over, as I sat there reading them one by one, I just was overcome with the impact that she had on people's spiritual lives, you know, their relationships with her. One thing I wanted to tell you was the last time Mother saw people, there were 3 new women, and Mother wanted me to be there with her. So it was just Mother and I and these 3 women. Now, in the later days, there were so many people coming that Mother could only see. Well, she saw people one-on-one for many years, or family on one or whatever. But in the later years, she had to start seeing groups of new people all at once, because there wasn't time or even the strength to see person after person after person. So this was what I'm going to tell you about is the last time she saw people in this way of greeting them, welcoming them to the center, newcomers. And I sat there and listened to her, witnessed her somehow. Of course, it was Baba leading her to say just the right thing, the intuitive thing that each of those women needed to hear. And they were weeping. I just couldn't believe it. I'm just sitting there in awe. Of course, I knew this, but to see it like this, so big and so beautiful, the room was filled with Baba's presence. And all 3 of these women were in tears, and they left in silence, just crying. So after they left, I turned to Mother and I said, "Mother, that was such a precious experience to witness that." And because it had been a long time for me. And she turned to me with the most radiant look and she said, "Oh no, Wendy." No, I said something about her, that you were able to touch each of their hearts. And she said, "Oh no, Wendy, it's not me. It's all Baba." With such love. And I just felt Baba so much. And that was the last time that I sat with her, with new people. Yeah. Now, your mother saw people, did see people one more time. Let's see. Yes, it was Easter Sunday, which was just a few days. It was March 30th. Now, that was the earliest Easter had been in a long time, many years, but because normally it falls in April, as you know, early April. But it was March 30th. Mother was quite ill, but she had this desire to say goodbye to people, to see people. Well, word got out. And I tell you, people came from the center, they came from the community. Somehow, you know how the Baba Grapevine is very efficient. And everybody, so many, and they started lining up. And the line went all the way around the studio, down to the path near Baba's house. People just waiting for the opportunity to kiss Mother goodbye. And Sandy Lyons and I were in charge. And Sandy, some of you may know, she was Mother's caregiver and assistant for the last 5 years of Mother's life. And so she and I were in charge. We were leading people in, we were leading them out. And I tell you, I was standing there, and one after another, not all of them, but many would come up to me one at a time and be weeping and say, "She was my mother too." And I said, I know. I understood completely, because that's what it was like for so many people. She said they would say she was my spiritual mother. It was very touching. So I wanted to share some about the last days. Now, this wasn't right. This was not within the 4 days that was near the end. It was sooner than that, but she was ill and she's in bed. I'm sitting there with her and she turned to me, just the two of us, and she says, "What do you think it will be like?" And I knew what she was asking. I said, "Mother, I don't know. I don't know. But one thing I am sure of is that you will be very happy." All I could think of. It's all that came to me. I don't know, but I know you, I'm sure you will be very happy. And she sat back. Then I'm going to skip to the last few days, maybe 3 or 4 days. I'm not sure exactly. And Mother would say the most wonderful thing. You'll get a kick out of this. She sat up one day in bed and she said, "Am I still on the ship?" And I said, "No, no, yes, Mother, you are. But you won't be for long. You'll be jumping into the ocean." And she laughed. She was so happy. Then another time she sat up and she said, "Now be sure, be really, really sure I'm dead before they cremate me." I thought that was so fun. I laughed and laughed and she laughed. It was very cute. She meant it. She did mean it. Oh gosh. And then I think it was the day, 2 days before, she was that actually the photo was in one of the ones you showed, Christopher, of Mira, the very large one in her bedroom, of beautiful orange tones, you know, in the orange frame, Indian frame. And Mother held that to her chest the whole, every day, just kept holding it and saying, and she said, "Mira, Mary is coming to take me home." And she said it more than once. "Mira, Mary is coming to take me home." Because if you all probably know that Monty had a vision of Mira as the Mother Mary, and Mother knew, and that from that moment on, even Monty started calling Mira, Mary. And then another time, this was very close. Mother said, she said, "Do you see him? Look, see? Oh, so beautiful. He's so beautiful. Can you see him? It's so beautiful." She was so, passing. And then one time she said, again, this is like the day before, she said, I'm new on this street. Can someone show me the way?" Sweet. Yeah. So, yeah, those were the last days. And Baba's presence was just so full in the room. I mean, he was so present. Yeah. So, and let me see. I want to make sure I got all that. Oh, yes. So then I wanted to share with you what happened to me. And I want to preface this by saying I'm not someone that has these kinds of experiences. You'll understand what I mean. But I was riding in the car, heading to an errand, doing an errand, and all of a sudden, I felt Mother's presence in the car. And it was so strong. I almost went off the road. I mean, I was just out of in an instant, there she was. Of course, I didn't see her, but she was sitting right there. And I even spoke, I said, "Mother," I mean, I was so taken aback. And she said, "Wendy," I heard with the inner voice, "Wendy, I wanted you to know I am very, very happy." Isn't that sweet? Yeah, it was very profound. And yeah, I don't know how long it lasted. You never know when things like that, time stops with Baba and experiences like that one. So now I thought I'd like to share with you a few letters if I may, I haven't talked that long. I have time, don't I? I have time.
Plenty of time.
Oh, well, anyway, I haven't asked permission for everybody, but I did ask. This is a letter from Marty McCabe. Now, Mother passes in 1997. This was just written last July by Marty McCabe, Dennis's wife. You know, Dennis works at the center for many, many, many years. And she says this, she says, because it's my birthday and hers is the next day. So she said, in my morning reading with my coffee and oatmeal with peanut butter, I have been reading again Kitty's book and have come to the place where you and your mom and brothers come into the picture. It has brought back fond memories of your mother and just in time for our birthday. I wanted to let you know how much she meant to me when I first came wandering into Baba's world. She was so loving to me, making me feel so welcomed and unreservedly included. I went to visit her and spend time with her as often as I could and talk with her about all my questions, concerns, and anxieties. And it seemed everything she said made me trust Baba more and more and want to run into this wonderful new world he was offering. And her embraces were so healing to my broken, frightened heart, so warm and reassuring and loving. And I needed that so much. That's an excerpt from the card. This is from someone else. We received many letters. I don't think Charles and Christopher have even seen half of them because I just put them in a box right away and haven't looked at them until yesterday and the day before. Anyway, so here's another beautiful card. I have told many times the story of how I first met Jane at Mayor House and how she looked like an angel that day. I remember that she held open her arms and ran into them, and I ran into them. She embraced me, someone she had never seen before, with such love. In that embrace, I felt warmth and sweetness and acceptance. I've never had another one quite like it from anyone. I'm just choosing excerpts because they're quite long, some of them. This is from a couple. Jane was always a beacon of love for all of those souls coming to the center, seeking God's love and understanding. She always taught us that God does have a plan for each of us and that we must continue to strive to do our very best. That beacon will continue forever and will never die out. And then I have two more. Maybe, no, this is the last one and this is from Heather. It's so beautiful. Oh, that's the wrong one. I got it. That was Luke. Written to all of us. When I think of your mom, two occasions stand out in my mind. The first was years ago when she was staying in Baba's interview cabin in Meherabad on one of her visits with Elizabeth. I used to take her tea in the morning. One morning, I went straight in with her tea, as she had told me to do. But this morning, she didn't hear me enter. She was sitting in her dressing gown at a little table, totally absorbed in looking at a picture of Baba. It was one of him taken in the 1930s with his hair down, looking extremely beautiful. The feeling of intimacy in the room and of love and adoration was so strong that I remember standing stock still holding the tea tray, shaken by my own intrusion. Your mother became aware of me suddenly and very sweetly brushed the awkwardness away. But I never forgot that glimpse of her love for Baba. The other time I especially remember was the last time we met in her studio, when we spent about an hour together. Your mom was more radiant, lively, and endearing than I had ever seen her. The love she gave me went straight to my heart. We had a wonderful time, an extraordinary time, actually, full of lightness and joy. So rare for me in those raw days after Monty's passing. I remember Jane once saying to me about Monty that she had, quote, spontaneous spiritual joy. And that was a perfect description of Jane herself that day. I felt at the time that I would never see her again, and just lapped up every moment of her presence. She seemed to me one of that very rare species, the very close ones, whose presence in life carry something of Baba, some physical connection that is passing out of our world, all the more precious because it does not last. Heaven. Beautiful. That's all I have. No, that's not true. I have one more thing.
Oh,
I
good.
just thought of this. There's too much to say. That's the problem. I want to find it. I can find it.
While you're looking, I'll just mention quickly, I had the opportunity of spending a little time towards the end of Jane's life with her in the studio because Cynthia, your sister-in-law, brought me there at Christmas time. I remember it was Christmas, and we went in and Jane came and spent time with us. But she asked me at one point if I would go around up the steps, like a little step up, and then there was an area in the studio, and there was, I think, a painting that Wendy had done. I think it was a small, she said, go get that over on the shelf over there, Ruth. I think it was a painting, a little painting that you had done. So I was so grateful to Cynthia for taking me that day.
Oh, Cynthia has moved an hour and 15 minutes away to Southport. You knew that, Ruthie. I don't know why I'm telling you that.
So great.
So, well, this did come to me that I thought you would enjoy. This is a poem that Mother wrote, and I don't know when, but I'm sure she wrote it once she came here. Thanks be to God this sunlit day for all his treasures no longer stowed away in consciousness' deep recesses. Unknown options ill-used, but newly opened light within the heart's newfound joy, glowing as jewels in the night, beloved's grace descended, personal, immediate, complete. Wonder of the sun is his, knowledge of love's bloom is his, sweetness of the whispering trees is his, blending nature's own with our humble self. As a symphony of muted joy, responding within our soul, ringing out with a song of gladness, gratitude, exalted joy. Thanks be to God, thanks be to our beloved. Isn't that beautiful?
Wow.
I love that.
That's amazing. That is so.
It is. And I had never seen it until after I found it. And Charlie Mills was so sweet. He wrote it up in calligraphy, beautiful calligraphy. Anyway.
Oh, Wendy, that's beautiful. And since this is recorded, I'm going to come back and look at that more carefully since you just displayed it so that I can glean some more. It was just beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
Jay Baba, I just also have to say, your mom, she really did understand people so well and just took Baba right into that place of understanding.
Yes.
When I brought Stephen, my first husband, to the center, he loved photography. It was his passion. He was a quiet person, but he just loved photography. And I think he may have taken a photo on Easter morning of the footbridge, and your mother saw it somehow. And so she asked him if he would come and take photographs at the center for a book for tax purposes,
Oh,
just so that, you know, there would be a photo of, there was a place where one of the hoses for the fire and, you know, fire extinguishers and paths. And so we got to come from Virginia, I don't know, maybe 6 times on a weekend. We'd jump in the car and he'd go out in the woods or take pictures here and there. And of course, this just drew him closer and closer to Baba. She just knew, you know, and again, I can't say enough about that creative nature. She just, there was something that Baba took that whole impetus of her creative self and brought it to us. So
that's right.
I'm gonna shut up. Now I'm gonna
No,
cry.
you didn't have to shut up. I know, no, I know. That is one thing I wanted to mention, and you did, Ruthie, is Mother's creative artistic abilities and her passion for art, which she passed on to me. And I'm so grateful for that. But that's not the point. The point is that it's one of the things that carried her through many, many times, especially the crisis that happened in Myrtle Beach around Charles and Christopher moving here and living here. What got her through were two things, of course, besides Baba's love, but I mean, physically, the painting, she painted all the time as much as she could, and going to Mepkin Abbey, which is not far from here, where she was beloved. They called her Lady Jane, and she would go there and meet with the monks and the abbot. You know, it's very precious to her. And of course, most of all, I meant to say this, it was Mani's love. Mani showered her with love during those last years until Mani passed herself. And you know, Mani and Mother's illnesses paralleled each other directly all the way to the end. And by that, I mean, Bob Aarons could tell you he was Mother's doctor and Mani's doctor. But whatever Mani had, Mother had the opposite. But the illnesses, the severity, everything just kept unfolding in the same, almost at the same time. The timing was extraordinary, you know. And of course, Mother's, once Mother got ill, which of course Mani had already passed, but Bob noted that, oh, this is when, you know, in terms of months, the tumor behind the wall of the stomach, Mani's in front, that kind of thing. Anyway, pretty amazing.
Wow. Well, and you know, I just have to say too quickly that when I remember seeing your mother when she came back from India, I think the last time, and she had been with Mara, and she kept telling us as a group that what Mara was saying, I think she was saying courage. I think the word was courage. Mara was telling her courage and indicating the heart, courage. And I carry that, you know, I carry that.
Yes.
What a great gift.
True.
Well, I see there are some hands up. I think Judy Robertson, we have to stop talking, Wendy. We'll let Judy talk. Jai Baba, Judy.
Where's Judy?
Hey, Baba, everyone, and especially thank you so much, Wendy, Charles, and Christopher, for such heartful, Baba-filled sharings of your mother. And in response, I have one vignette to share, especially with Wendy and Charles and everyone else. And of course, I had the good fortune to know Jane from Myrtle Beach, but this takes place when I was living over in India as a part-time resident. And if I remember correctly, it was in the fall of '95 that Jane came, what I believe to be her last trip to Mehrabad and Marathon. And it was so beautiful to observe. Among other things, as you will well remember, I'm making this easy assumption, a very hard time in the Haynes family. And Monty rolled out the red carpet so beautifully at every moment, as publicly as possible, for Jane, for her sister, as she called her whenever she introduced her. And when the ladies, the women Mondali came for ladies' arti at Meher Baba's Samadhi, Monty made sure that Jane was sitting right next to her, looking straight into the Samadhi the whole time. And she did the same thing, like on Sundays when there's the program at Merazad, and there's a row of chairs where the women Mondali sit, the front row, and Monty made sure that Jane was sitting right next to her. As I recall, Monty never mentioned anything publicly, but her actions of love and respect for Jane Haynes spoke volumes. And it was, from my point of view, the opportunity to see the love between the two of them at what perhaps both of them or neither of them I knew would be their last opportunity to be together physically in Baba's presence at Mehrabad. Well, Baba's present, we didn't get to see. They may have seen him, I didn't. But it was this beautiful display of Baba's love between Jane and Monty as birthday sisters, as sisters of God together. And it was so beautiful. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, Judy. Thank you, dear. Ron, Jai Baba, good morning or afternoon.
Good morning. Thanks for this opportunity to remember Jane. I have one personal anecdote in which Jane has a key role. I mean, very key. And this was the second time, my second pilgrimage to the Mayor's Center in this would be the summer of '72. And I had been out of work. I had quit my job at the City of Miami Water and Sewer Department and went to a gathering in Colorado. And then I went to New York to hang out there. I can't hardly remember that much about it, but I was there for a while. And then flew into that little airport that was Myrtle Beach Airport in '72, picked up by Elizabeth Patterson in her car. She drove me to the center and dropped me off at the gateway. And when I walked in, Jane was working the gateway. This is the old gateway. And so I don't think I had met Jane on my first trip. I can't really remember whether I did or not, but nothing like this. Here we sat down and we started talking about where I had just come from, which was one of her favorite places, I assume, which was New York City. And she was asking me, did you see any plays or musicals and things like that? And I believe I had seen a couple while I was there. And so she asked me about it. We must have been talking for half hour, 40 minutes or something like that, about that kind of thing. She didn't really ask me anything personal about myself until she said, oh, I have to get back to doing this gateway thing here. And so I'll let you go into the center. And so as I was walking out the door, she said, oh, wait a minute. I didn't even ask you. So what do you do in Miami, which is where I was living in those days, where I grew up and was born. And I thought to myself, what am I going to say? I don't have a job. I don't go to school. I think she asked me, do you have, what are you doing? Like, do you have a job, or are you a student, or whatever? And I had nothing to say. And I said, well, I'm not really sure. I don't really have anything going right now. Anyhow, she let me go, and I started walking into the center, and I realized that something was wrong here for me, which was Baba just put it right in front of me that I had gone off onto this idea that I had a spiritual role to play in the world, and not really needing to, have a career or a job or any of that kind of thing. And that disturbed me, because I had a feeling that that was the wrong trip to be on. And so for the next day or 2 or 3, I suffered with that, looking at that. And it was Maya had tricked me into this whole thing, and I felt stuck because I didn't really know what to do to correct it or to help the situation. And so I thought to myself, maybe I should go see Kitty, who I had heard would be a good person to seek advice from. So on my way to Dilruba to talk with Kitty, I stopped by at the reading room where Margaret Krask, who was in town, was telling stories. And so I sat down and took in some of Margaret's stories. And when she was finished, I realized it was about that time for me for my appointment with Kitty. And that's the same place Margaret was going to. So I said, can I walk with you? So as we began walking down that path to Dilruba, I realized, it was very clear to me that Kitty was not going to be offering me what I felt I needed. What I didn't know exactly what that was, but I knew that Margaret was going to somehow have the answer for me. And in fact, the very first thing Margaret said, in a way to begin a conversation, was, where are you from? And I told her where I was from. And so what do you do there in Miami? And I knew that was coming. And I was struggling. I was still struggling. What do I do? What do I say here? And I said, well, I don't really have anything that I do right now. And she goes, oh, so what do you like to do? Now that was a revelation for me. What do I like to do? That's pretty wise. So, but I was still struggling. What am I going to say that I like to do? But in order to be as honest as I possibly could, I told her, well, I do like cooking. She goes, well, you should work in a hotel or a restaurant and be a cook. And I realized that I had asked Baba months before about whether I should try to get a job in this new natural foods restaurant that had opened up. And I basically felt I got a positive answer, but I didn't really follow up on it because I went traveling instead. But then I knew. And so really, I had a goal in mind now. And I did go back, got the job at this restaurant, became a cook there for a few years on and off. And that was a day in my, a day or a week in my life that is unforgettable, and began a life of the love, grace, and guidance of Baba. So, and Jane was definitely somebody that got it rolling for me. So I appreciate Jane in that respect, and all the other times that I had a chance to be around her, and appreciate her work for Baba. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Ron, that certainly was Jane's role, wasn't it? To get us moving, keep us looking forward. Beautiful. Thank you. And Rosalie, Jai Baba.
Hey, Baba, I came in late because I thought it was Monday somehow. Anyway, Jane, for me, I met her on my very first time pilgrimage here to the center, November 16th, 1971. And Jane, for me, she just knew about suffering. Like she just, I just knew she knew about suffering. And in a world that is celebrated, like in our country, you know, celebrity and what's important, she knew the pain of that. And for me, that was really important. I just felt this very deep connection. And yet that her love, I could remember giving her a holy card. It was like a Christmas thing. And she just, it was so beautiful to give it to her. She just, you know, she just kind of melted, like in adoration of her feeling of that, you know. And you know, I'm raised Catholic, and that to me is just so important. But I actually, this very morning, I was thinking about Baba coming to Hollywood in 32, and like the suffering that was happening. And this beautiful Baba comes, and he's treated like a celebrity. He has a big going doings at the Knickerbocker, and the very next day, pick fair. 2,000 people from the film world. And I was thinking that was a very seedy time in the United States. I mean, you know, it was like, I don't know if it was already repression of alcohol and that whole thing, but, you know, that whole performance thing of those people. And one that comes to my mind, and Wendy, that you're there, is her connection with Zazu Pitts. Zazu. I was at the center one time. It wasn't that time, but there was a senator there, maybe a United States senator, or he thought he was. He was so huffed up. He was strutting around, and Jane was at her genial best with showing him around and making him feel his importance. But I had brought Jane a picture of Zazu Pitts, an old picture that she'd never seen, and I showed it to her. She was with the senator, and she lost her focus on showing him around. And she went, "Oh, Zazu." And then she knew she had to work herself back to tending to the senator. And I think they were the question of the freedom of the center from taxes would in question there. And the next thing I knew was Margaret Krask. And this senator almost bumped into Margaret, and she shot him a look that it's good he didn't see it. He would have known his place. And but just that connection, I want to hear, like, it was because of Zazu that Jane happened to get to meet Baba. Was it? I thought something like Zazu had a flat tire or something, and Jane went in there and met Baba. I might have it wrong, but I don't think
Rosalie, you're right. Zazu Pitts was a close friend of Mother's, and she was starring at Mother's Theater the week Norina died.
Wow.
And so she saw in the paper the obituary of Norina Machiavelli, Zazu did. And she long story short, she decided she wanted to go to the center because she missed Papa when he was in Hollywood.
Mm.
And again, cutting the story short, it was arranged for her by Eileen Coates to go to the center. And she didn't show up the day that somebody came to pick her up. And so my mother went instead. So mother was the substitute and went to see Elizabeth and Kitty had a lovely kind of lunch prepared, a picnic lunch at the center. And that was her introduction. So that's how mother came to Baba through being the person that substituted for Zazu Pitts.
Wow. Wow. What a substitution. Wow. I did, also with this suffering thing with Jane, I wanted to say one line about the joy, because it's from Baba speaking to Narina, and this one line is so precious that I just can't get it out of my being. It's God in us is rejoicing his own experience of joy. And joy, when those messages were taken down, that was totally capitalized. And experience was italicized. So it wasn't just thinking joy, or it was God in us is experiencing his own, is rejoicing his own experience of joy. Yeah, Jai Baba. Thank
Jai
you.
Baba, Rosalie. Thank you, dear. Well, we have a few more hands, and I know we've been here a little while, so I'm gonna ask Betty to share.
Okay, first of all, Charles, I'm remembering a detail that it may be right. I remember your mother telling a story about having to substitute for Zazu Pitts, and it was more dramatic than that. She was, I think, in the middle of painting something. She was wearing, painting clothes, and I remember saying their Toreador pants were too tight. And do I have that right? Is this the time? And there she was on the spot, and if she didn't go, nobody was going to go, so she just had to fill in.
That's right. That's right. It's a long story. I didn't tell all the detail, but that's exactly right.
So that was,
Oh, wow.
yeah. Our family has been once to Myrtle Beach. We went out with our California group, kind of crossed the Great Divide and went over to once back east to Myrtle Beach. Our family, both three of our kids went out of our five, and a couple of other Baba lovers from our group, and it was just this grand, maybe week and a half at Myrtle Beach. It was just so wonderful. And Jane was the person that we were to see to introduce us, and so my husband Dave and I and our three kids went to her house, your house, and she was of course gracious, and she invited us in, and how it got kind of deep pretty quickly, and I don't remember how or why that happened. She was sharing her story, her early days that were very really painful and intense, and of course I was listening, but she said, I don't know why I'm telling you this, and I said, Jane, I do. These children have just lost their mother. These are my stepkids. And the dam broke. She took the whole family. She became mother to our family the whole week and a half we were there. She I remember our 13-year-old Gary petting your cat BB over, weeping, just weeping as she was I can't remember what she said after that. It was just she just took us in. If we would go to a meeting, she would have us sit, she just usher us right in, and we'd sit in front, and we just became her family the week and a half we were there. I remember her grandson Mark was there, and she put him together with our 21-year-old. She was just the beautiful Southern gracious mother to, oh my goodness, it was intense, this relationship with her. When we left, every one of us got a little Lammy photo with a note from her, and I remember our 13-year-old. We couldn't. We were in a rush to go, and we had to. I don't know where he had to leave something for her. We had to get a plant and leave. She wasn't there, but he had to leave a present for her. So it was just an amazing, intense, immediate connection with her. I'll never forget it. That's all. Jai Baba.
Thank you, Betty, for sharing that. So beautiful.
Jai Baba, Betty. So much love. Joy, did you want to share something?
Yeah. Oh, I'm unmuted. Good. Never know. Yeah. I had been going to Myrtle Beach maybe every year for a little while. And when I was in Chicago one year, I decided to go to nursing school. I was 50 years old, and I said, I'm going to nursing school. So I started at the community college at the prereqs and all that. Oh, before I say that, I just wanted to say I'm just riveted this whole time. Thank you so much, Charles and Christopher and Wendy. And Charles, I had tears in my eyes. I mean, Wendy, I had tears in my eyes when you were talking about, no, Charles, I had tears in my eyes when you were talking about your mom and Baba in the lagoon cabin. You weren't the only one crying. So anyway, back to, I decided during winter break from the community college to take the Greyhound bus from Chicago to Myrtle Beach. That was really hell, but on the way back especially. But when I got there, nobody was really there. My memory is that it was really cold and gray, and I had the heater on in my room the whole time in the cabin. And I think I must have asked, can I meet somebody here, an interview or something. I heard about interviews. So I got an interview with Jane. And it stands out for me as the most important part of that trip. I remember going to her house, and I thought I went up some stairs, but not really sure. Don't remember much about the background. And I said, I'm in nursing school. And she said, oh, Baba loved nurses. I had never heard this before. And I thought, really? And then I said, really? Oh, yes, Baba loved nurses. And that kind of sealed the deal for me that, well, he'll love me then, because that's what I plan to be. But she was so enthusiastic and so one-pointed on me and so real. It was like the whole thing was black and white. And when I saw Jane, things turned into color. And I really felt her interest and love and theirness. And it's never left me. Baba loved nurses. And I don't know if she was just helping me or if he really did. He told her that. I don't know, but it worked. And then I went on to become a nurse. Not solely because of that, but that really, I was so relieved to hear that somehow. Jamie here, Baba, thank you.
Joy, that's beautiful. Thank you. I'm a nurse.
Yes, I know.
Deborah, Jai Baba, so good to see you.
There, am I unmuted now? Am
Yes.
I unmuted?
Yes,
Okay.
darling, you are.
All right. I just first want to thank Christopher and Charles and Wendy. The three of you moved me to tears with with your stories and made me laugh too. And that was a wonderful thing. So many snapshots went across my mind as I was hearing these stories. And I first met Jane in 73 and experienced for the first time unconditional love. It was the sweetest feeling in the world to me. And we had a mother-daughter connection. She definitely was a spiritual mother for me and was there for me in phone conversations and visits in the center so many times for the joys and the difficult times that I'd gone through. She was one of two witnesses at Bill's and mine's wedding at crewman Margaret Jordan's home. In fact, she drove us there. It was really very special memory. She was there for us after we lost our first child, Matthew, and as Charles remembers, he was there too at the funeral home. Then the joy of having Frances Mara in our lives. And for a while there, she was even introducing me as her daughter, and Frances Mara as her granddaughter, which touched me to no end. So that was very, very special. Just so many times, just the little things that happened. When she even invited me to a dinner in Dilruba with Elizabeth, and when she asked me to help out with Kitty, and just so many special things happened over the years. I loved her dearly. I still do. And Wendy, thank you for when I got to see your mother at the end, the 5 days before she passed, with Frances Mara. And she looked at Frances Mara and she said, "Is that my Mary?" And it was so sweet. So anyway, thank you all. This has just been such a special time of sharing. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, Deborah. Thank you so much. And Tony. Jai Baba.
Me. Am I unmuted?
Yes, dear.
Good, because you're also on the TV, so I didn't know if the mic would work. Some of you may know I was in this group in New York that formed around Harry Kenmore, and after he passed, it became very strange and very strangling in a way. And I finally got out after many years, and I was shaken. But I was back with Baba, and about a year and a half later, I got to take my first trip back to the center. This first time on my own since 1971, and I was a heavy smoker at the time, and new rules had gone up in the center that you could only smoke here and here, practically nowhere. As far as I was concerned, it was practically nowhere. And I guess I took it really personally. In retrospect, I did take it very personally, but I was not conscious of that. All I knew was, well, this is not going to work for me. I can't. I'm addicted to these cigarettes. I can't just stand out in the cold, because it was like in March or something. And so I was going to cut short my trip. And I mentioned I was going to leave early, and I went to Gateway or whatever. But I must have mentioned to someone what was going on and why I left. And not long after that, I got a message saying, Jane said, "Tell Tony he can smoke anywhere he wants." And it wasn't about the cigarettes. I felt it was like Baba saying, "You're mine. I accept your cigarettes and all." And I mean, I eventually quit smoking, but it was one of the most wonderful things. Fast forward to, my mother saw me come to Baba in 1970 after a tumultuous year of search in 69, and Catholic family. And it took a long time for her she had reached the point of, well, he's a saintly person, which was a big accomplishment after like 40 years. But her best friend across the street had moved to Myrtle Beach. And so they took a little vacation and they went to visit Helen Korber in Myrtle Beach. And she said, well, I'm going to go to this center if I'm here, see what this place is that he's making such a fuss about. And Jane met her. I don't know whether it was Jane's house, Dilruba, Baba's house, but she said she took me on a tour of the house. She took me all around. the sentence I remember from and I went searching just now for the photo of my mom with Jane. It's so beautiful. I can't find it right now. But she came back glowing, saying about your mom, she treated me like a queen. And she was so touched. And I really think that's what opened my mother's heart to Baba, to the point that when she was dying in 2005 in the hospital, I was saying, like, the our father and those prayers kind of things for her. She could hardly speak. She was in so much pain. And I started to say the Baba's prayers. And then I thought, no, I don't want to push this on her if she's not feeling. I'll say the one she likes. And I stopped for a moment. She squeezed my hand really hard. She wanted to hear Baba's prayer, and I did, and she passed several hours later. But I think the turning point for her was being treated like a queen by Jane. Oh, and one other thing: at some point in my life, Baba was urging me to become an actor, to go into acting, studying acting, and I did some, and I wound up doing some off Broadway in New York. But my first reaction with the first community theater I was in, backstage, was, I'm with my people. It's like, these people are all like me. And I realized that part of why I felt in a special bond with Jane, and now I'm learning with Wendy, I didn't realize you had also been an actor, was that it's like, you're my people. So, and Baba, in Baba, even bigger. So thank you. I'm really happy I got to share that. I wish I could have found the photo. It's so lovely. The two of them arm in arm, and Baba's big picture on the wall. Wonderful. Jai Baba.
Tony, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I love that, especially the image of mother taking your mother around. Maybe it was Baba's house, but it's so beautiful. And then you saying the prayers with her. That is just so beautiful. So how Baba links us to him through someone, and that's so beautiful. Thank you for.
Thank you.
Beautiful, Tony. Thank you. Beautiful.
And yes, Deborah, I just want to say, mother, yes, she thought of you as her daughter. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Yeah, she loved you so much. And you gave her a lot too. All of you who have talked and shared, it's very sweet, Bob, how much Jane gave to you, or Baba through Jane, but each of you, Betty and Rosalie, each of you who've spoken, and all of you really gave joy, gave mother so much. I mean, she lived for experiencing Baba through those who came and who loved him. And that was Baba's gift to her, is to experience him through all of you. So thank you. And Ron, too. Ron, you go back to almost the beginning.
What's that? What,
Ron looks the same, but he actually was there so many years ago in the beginning. People coming, the people, new people coming, and those days it was such a special thing. And this was true for the Manli in India too, to see people come with their hearts full of love for Baba. And that was as though Baba were arriving. Elizabeth always felt that was what Baba meant, that he would come to the center, that he was arriving. And so she kept the center ready for all of those who came, because she said, you see, Baba comes when they come. Baba comes through them.
Yes. She said she wanted to keep the center as if Baba was coming to the gate, coming through the gate. It's so beautiful. I wanted to just add something. I know that I think there may be someone else. I think everyone has spoken who wanted to raise their hand. Anyway, one thing, it really was hard to choose what to share, because Mother's life was so full and was Baba's. But we didn't talk until Betty. I'm so happy you brought up the children who had lost their mother, because that was a huge part of who Mother was her love, deep, deep love for children. I mean, she was a Pied Piper, And I remember in New York City, wherever we went, we were in an elevator and there was a baby. That baby would turn to mother, lean over, grab her Baba locket and start kissing it. I mean, it happened so many times. Of course, sometimes they swallowed it or they tried, but I mean, you know, babies like like dangling things. But I mean, really, it was so precious to see that. It happened a lot. But I found this card, it's real quick, that has a little excerpt. I'll take an excerpt from it about children. It's from a family. It was such a joy to have known Jane. One of the highlights of our visit to the center was taking our children to see her. She would always let them play with the telephone, saying that Baba was on the line and wanted to speak to them. She had such a unique love for children. That was a big part of her life.
I received something in the email this morning from Peter Goodman, who spent his childhood at the center, and he wrote a very long, beautiful tribute to his time. But he did say he would never forget when Jane gave tours of Baba's house when he was a child. That's
so sweet.
Oh, I know what it was. He said that as the children came in, she would let them hold Baba's flag as a group. So she always had time for the children at Baba's house, and he was one of those children. And he also remembered that when he would come to visit at your house, she had these little plastic zoo animals, like
yes.
little,
A basketball.
right? And right. And he said his father still has them at his practice, his chiropractic practice for the children. So, and one other thing I just wanted to share, since we're speaking of all these times with Jane and all the beauty that she brought to our lives. This is a painting that she gave him of Mara and Mani and Baba.
Yes.
And so he wanted that also to be seen.
Oh,
So
that's wonderful.
Isn't it beautiful?
It is beautiful. He loves that painting.
There's a presence. There's such a presence there.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Anyways, I just had to put in Peter's 2 cents because
he'll be very happy, Ruthie.
Yeah.
Speaking of children, I forgot to mention that whenever Bill and Mara and I would go out with to dinner with Jane, she always had a little present for her. And there were just sweet little things that she would have. This beautifully decorated horse that I remember, and a little doll. I mean, she always had some sweet thing for her.
Wonderful.
And one other special memory I remember too was after Elizabeth passed, and it was so hard for your mother, I think, to give the tour not long after that. And she clutched onto my hand and held it tightly going throughout the house. And I felt like, oh, I'm able to help give her support, to the one who's given all of us so much support. And that's a very special memory.
That's lovely. Lovely.
Well, Tony, I think you have something you wanted also to add.
Yes, it just occurred to me, you mentioned the World's Fair. It's quite possible that your mom was my first Baba contact in this life. My mother took us to the World's Fair every weekend for both 64 and 65, and it was wonderful and all that. But one day she was into she had an earthy, artsy energy, and she wanted to go to the American Interiors building. And so we went, and she's looking at furniture and living room, and it was like I was bored. And we were on the 3rd floor, and on the 2nd floor, I had seen a water cooler that gave free 7-Up. So I said, "Why don't you stay here with my brother, and I'm going to go down and I'll get 7-Up for all of us." And I ran down, and I was filling it up, and now this memory came back to me way after I was with Baba. There was this Baba booth right across from the 7-Up machine. I don't know if anyone remembers that. That's my memory of it. And I went over, and I remember looking at the pictures, and I remember, I believe, reading the Universal Message was on display. There was something on it. And I remember a woman there who, she didn't say much, but there was a real connection, and she glowed. And at some point, I kind of nodded and she nodded, and I ran upstairs with I was like 11 years old, and I went up with my 7-Up, and I thought, well, maybe that was Kitty, but it never felt quite right. But when I thought maybe that was Jane, it does feel right. So it's quite possible.
Wonderful. Yeah,
That's
that's
lovely.
right. Could be.
That's incredible. Yeah. Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
asked Baba, in 58 if he liked 7-Up in the barn, right? Remember somebody said, well, Baba, they were teasing Baba, so yeah, Baba, we saw them taking in a carton of 7-Up into your home. Does that mean you like 7-Up? And Baba said, no. He said, I am 7-Up.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. This has been just amazing, and I don't want to hold everyone, but I just want to thank Wendy and Charles and Christopher and say thank you so much. And maybe just a moment of silence for us all together would be.
Could I just say something? I just wanted to thank you, Ruthie, for making this possible, and also everyone for letting us have this sharing about Mother. It was so beautiful. Thank you for that opportunity and to hear your stories. Okay, moment of silence.
Jai Baba. Avatar Mir Baba.
Yay.
Bye.
Mir Baba.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Wendy, Charles, and Christopher. Bye-bye. Bye, Ruthie.
Bye.
Much love.
Bye.
There.
Bye, Wendy.
Lots of